Well, good evening and welcome to another episode of Rich Politics with me, your host, Richard Taylor. It's a weekly, non-politically correct broadcast brought to you from my Welsh home here, my studio, of course, just a Welshman ranting about all things politics. And of course, today we've had the big budget announcement. Don't know what you thought about it. A lot of detail, maybe we need to look into it a bit deeper. But I've got someone on tonight. Matt Kilcoyne from the Adam Smith Institute was supposed to be joining me, but he's not. We've got a much better looking person than him, far more intelligent than him. We've got Morgan Sian Delmeier. I hope I've said that right, Morgan, who is the head of external affairs at the Adam Smith Institute. Morgan, welcome to Rich Politics. Let's start off. What did you think of the Chancellor's performance at the budget today?
I like that you use the word performance because he's a pretty good performer. I think he likes the show, the pomp and circumstance of it. It was very heavy. There was a lot in there, and I think we maybe experienced a bit of like information overload towards the end, where we're just like, could there possibly be more things? But it's just a further continuation of kind of a high tax, high spend government. So I felt like Labour really had no way they could come back against that government and say that the Conservatives weren't spending enough. There are some good things there on the cost of living, but really I think we're still seeing a lot of government intervention and a lot of taxing and a ton of spending commitments.
Yeah, it's amazing, it because Conservatives talk about being a low tax government, but yet, what we've seen in the recent weeks and months, of course, is them raising taxes in different areas. Of course, with the national insurance tax hike, we've seen many other areas as well. They're taking away £20 a week of universal credit from the less well paid off. But shouldn't he kind of really try to push the kind of universal credit thing today, because they talked about changing the 63 pence in every pound to 55 pence, and so those working would be better off. Do you think that's enough to appease those who are low paid in society?
I don't think it is. I think it's a really important mechanism that should be used to make sure that we are not cutting people off the moment that they, start working, start earning more. But I think there's a lot more things that we need to be doing. For example, because this incentivizes work, those people that are physically or mentally unable to work will not experience this as a benefit. So we need to make sure we're focusing on still targeting our welfare support in the places where it's most needed. But I don't think this will be enough to appease people, especially when you see things like national insurance rise, which is a tax on working people and a tax on employers even. So yes, this budget included a lot of cuts on duties and, a few things in the cost of living. But that's the complete antithesis of everything that's been leading up to this moment for the last couple of months.
Yeah, a lot of people on social media this afternoon have been calling them like kind of the blue socialists, with the way that they're pushing a lot of their policy changes and things. And of course, this announcement on the budget. Let's talk about some of those policy changes or some of those budget announcements. The freeze on fuel duty. Man, we all know the cost of fuel, right? I mean, listen, I live in Wales, right? You need a car to get round, right? Most of my viewers as well are from Wales, and you need to be able to get round. The price of petrol, we know it's the big companies that are putting the prices up. But that fuel duty has been frozen for quite a while, and they're going to continue again with the freeze on fuel duty. But will it really make a difference at the price of the pump, though? Because we're still seeing prices going up, aren't we?
Yeah, I think there's no way that they could have brought back the fuel duty if prices are going up as well. Like, it would just been a double whammy, and it would have been horrible headlines. But I think we can kind of stop pretending that fuel duty is ever going to come back. At this point, it's been frozen for,
10 years to 10 years,
yeah,
in a decade or so.
Over 10 years, yeah. So I'm not really sure it's really going to come back anytime soon. But it's another good thing the government gets to say, oh, look what we did for you. But the larger problem there, are higher gas prices, which is going to continue, especially as we continue to see a shortage in drivers and more costs in the production line of getting petrol to stations, all of that. So I'm not surprised that they continued the freeze.
Yeah.
I don't think the freeze will ever be frozen.
What did you make of the criticism from the Speaker of the House, actually, over the leaks the government were giving out information to the press before bringing it to the House of Commons? They were accused of actually doing something that isn't following the code of conduct. What did you make of that?
Yeah, I think the Speaker is well within his rights to criticize what is a breach of standard protocol. There was a lot leaked, and then we kind of went into the budget wondering what else they could possibly announce, but they just kept pulling rabbits out of the hat in the budget as well. So we certainly didn't get it all in advance, but there was a lot more than normal. And I think that some Tory backbenchers might actually be a little bit miffed by that they didn't have kind of privileged access and the public heard just as they did. I think this goes a lot along with brand Rishi. So the Treasury and Number 11 worked very hard to cultivate the brand that is Rishi Sunak, and all of these leaks kind of reinforce that and show that this is Rishi who is doing this. This is the Treasury, and you can thank us at the end of the day.
Do you think he's more of a showman than he is substance? And is he kind of eyeing himself up to be the next prime minister?
He's definitely eyeing himself up to be the next prime minister, but I do think he has a lot of substance. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he's done in recent months, but I think that during the pandemic, he really made a lot of hard decisions that needed to be made. And I hope he continues making hard decisions in terms of fiscal responsibility and cutting spending when it gets tough, instead of just splashing money around. It's very easy to spend money. It's a lot harder to tell people that, look, we have to tighten our belts now. We're not in a pandemic anymore. And you kind of need to stand on your own 2 feet, whether you're a business or, the regular taxpayer.
Yeah, I think the thing important for our viewers to remember as well, it's not their money, it's our money. I think we always need to caveat it with that whatever the announcements are made, we're spending billions on this and billions, and I'm sitting there thinking, that's our money, that's our money. So there's fiscal responsibility there. Talking about fiscal responsibility, we mentioned briefly about the increase in universal credit. It's going to benefit people because of that cut to 55 pence. But we've got, of course, an increase in national insurance, but surely that's going to be kind of levied up by the increase from the minimum wage, which comes into place, which is a 6.6% increase from £8.91 an hour to £9.50. Will people see a real difference in their pockets, do you think, Morgan, from your opinion, when it comes to when they get their pay on payday?
I think the people at the lowest ends will see a difference. I think it could evaporate very quickly if we see prices rise, which is a very real consequence of raising the minimum wage. When you raise the price of labor, companies are going to pass that on to their consumers. That's the easiest way to get through. And another thing we have to remember is people who work in minimum wage jobs often shop at minimum wage places. So they're shopping at more affordable stores and, entertaining themselves at more affordable pubs and all of these things. So they're going to see a marked increase in their expenditure because of their own wage increases, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, talking of pubs. Now, you mentioned pubs. I want to come to that because that was in the budget as well. And actually, that got more of a response from Parliament than anything else he announced, which says a lot about our politicians. But anyway, when he talked about the changes to alcohol duty, which we haven't seen for I don't know how long, in a generation. And of course, higher strength alcohol will be taxed at a higher rate. So, make sure people are aware of that. But the lower strength alcohol wouldn't. And there's been a freeze on some of the duties to do with spirits and whiskey and stuff like that. Do you think that that's going to be celebrated by people more than anything else in the budget? Yes, great to have universal credit. That changed from 63 pence to 55. Great to have a rise in minimum wage. But I think most people in the country, well, my friends certainly, will be cheering the fact that beer is not going up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is one of those things that people will remember long after they've forgotten everything else. And when we have information overload, like I mentioned, people will grab onto one thing. And beer and alcohol is a very tangible thing that we all experience. Many of us on a daily or definitely a weekly basis. And this is something that ASI has called for a long time, is focusing the levies on alcohol to be based on their strength. There's really no better way to do it. It's best from a public health standpoint. It makes sense in terms of international equivalencies. You don't have to worry about favorite nation status for, English wine's cheaper than French wine or whatever. French wine's stronger. French wine's more expensive. So I think this is a good way. Is it the most effective way to make things cheaper for people? Probably not. We could focus on a lot more reforms, which is just lower the price of goods and increase wages across the board. But, a cheaper pint's always going to be a popular policy.
Yeah, well, we've gone from pints, we've gone from minimum wage, we've gone from the freeze on food duty. Let's finish off then this afternoon with a very simple one. The passenger duty. Now, they talked about, obviously getting rid of it or whatever the case might be domestically, but over a certain, I think it's 5,500 miles of travel, they said, internationally, then of course it's going to punish those. And we got COP26 coming up. Boris is saying all the right things, as you'd expect any prime minister to do at this time of the year when it's, COP26 is happening. But will it really make a difference, really? Because domestic flights, let's be honest, I live in Wales, right? Cardiff Airport's been running at a loss of millions of pounds every single year under the Welsh government, which is Labour, by the way. I wonder what difference that really is going to make? Of course, there's going to be tax savings there, but is it really going to make a difference? And what about the impact on the climate?
Yeah, I'd have to actually look at the data on how many domestic flights are taken every day. I imagine it's probably not that many, the biggest being from anyone getting from England to Northern Ireland, probably, or Scotland. But other than that, I can't imagine many people are really flying from London to Manchester or something like that. So yes, it's probably going to have a very small impact in terms of everyday people flying. But it, again, is a signal to regional airports. It's a signal to the leveling up that we want people to be moving about Britain. And I don't think it balances out with the over 5,500 miles thing, because those flights are very economic or environmentally damaging. But it's not just rich people taking those flights. Like myself, I'm American, so whenever I fly home, I'm paying hundreds of pounds in duty. And I'm not doing it for fun. I'm doing it because, I miss my family and all of that. So we shouldn't be judging people on why they choose to fly. I don't think it's the best way to tackle the environmental crisis. But what he's done here is he's made a signal to regional airports and different regions in the UK to say, I've got your back, but also I'm not totally forgetting about the climate. I'm going to charge more for these long haul flights.
Yeah, and do you think now, coming to the close of this, from the Adam Smith Institute's perspective, was this announcement welcome today? Were there areas you were happy with, not happy with? And do you think this is really, because let's be honest, most of the public were not watching the budget announcement today. Now, people like you and I probably were, because we're geeks, right? We love the whole political stuff, right? But, will it really make a difference to people's lives? And from the ASI's point of view, do you think that there are a lot of good things in the announcement, in the budget? And are there any bad things in that announcement today?
In terms of bad, I think it's really just a continuation of a Conservative Party that is very happy to spend taxpayers' money for a lot of vanity projects, a lot of leveling up, which seems very ill-defined, a lot of taxpayer money going into things that could otherwise be fixed through reforms. So we saw, money going towards early childcare. That's great, but also have we looked at teacher to student ratios? Have we looked at things that could actually bring down the cost of childcare instead of subsidies? Actual meaningful reforms. So I think that's lacking from this government, because they've gotten used to spending a lot of money. But in terms of good things, again, I mentioned targeting the cost of living. That's really important. We like the equating alcohol duties to strength. That's good. There are a few other things on expensing of investment into your property for business rates, but there are more meaningful changes the government should make instead of this tinkering at the edges.
Yeah, and there's a big cut to business rates, 50% as well. That's going to, we've seen a big cut in that during the pandemic, of course, as well. And of course, there's a question. I'm not an economist by any means, and I know the basics of how it works, but the government's got itself into billions and billions of pounds of debt through the pandemic, through furlough, through so many different schemes and different things, and now it seems to be throwing money at everything. What I fear the worst, for me personally, I'm thinking to myself, are we going to get to the point where we're going to have a period of austerity to pay for the government spending, which is what the Conservative Party came into power had to do after Labour? And I wonder if the kind of whole cycle is happening again.
I think these cycles do happen because, again, you're very politically popular when you spend a lot of money, and you just hope that it's someone else who has to pick up the bill. Rishi did make motions towards fiscal responsibility, outlining these two rules that they've put in place, but they also happen to be the rules that the government's already on track to meet. So it doesn't really seem like any actual change is going to happen long term. They're just saying, these are the rules. What we're doing now is going to meet them, so that's fine, but we have rules. But that kind of means nothing in the long term in terms of fiscal responsibility. So I do worry that we'll get to a point where it becomes politically impossible to cut back the spending unless you go for a full austerity. I'm sure the Tory government will do whatever they can to avoid that, because they spent 10 years trying to justify it in the first place. They probably don't want to do it again.
Well, let's hope not. Morgan, Sian, Delmeier, thank you so much for joining us on Rich Politics. Our time is brief, our time is up. It's been an absolute pleasure. Head of External Affairs, Morgan from the Adam Smith Institute. Thank you very much for joining us on Rich Politics.
Thank you.